All right, man. Thank you. I appreciate you coming, Paul.
Yeah, no problem.
We're going to talk to Paul Bunker today. I met Paul roughly 2005, 2006.
Yeah, 2005, early.
We were working a specialized search dog program, but there's so much about Paul that we want to talk about prior to that. Maybe some stuff that a lot of people here don't know. So, Paul, you served in the British Army, right?
Correct, yeah, Royal Army Veterinary Corps.
Was that a specific job, or did you do another job first and then go into that?
So everyone, back then, everyone that joined the British military had to be infantry trained. So I did 6 months basic training with the infantry. So I passed out as an infantry trained soldier. The rest of because I was the only Royal Army Veterinary Corps within our platoon. The rest of the platoon went to their infantry units, but I then went to corps training. So that was 6 months basic. And then I did another 6 months to become a dog trainer or potential dog trainer.
And not to put your age out there, but what year?
That was 82 when I started. 83, I went to the Army Dog Training School as it was then. It's now joint services, but it was just Army. So you did a 2-week dog handler course, very basic, with a trained, a retired old trainer dog like they use at Lackland. Just to learn the very basics of patrol work. And then went up to equitation, and you had to do 3 months to learn how to ride a horse. Because at that time, we were a mounted corps. So at any time, like the big parades and stuff for the royal family, they could have called on us to ride a horse if they needed extra riders. I never did. I mean, I didn't enjoy horse riding at all. So I did 3 months of that. Then we did 1 month at the veterinary hospital, learning all the veterinary side and very basic, but first aid and veterinary technician work. And then you go on to your dog trainer's course, which was a 3-month course. And at that time, I was the only entrant at that time. So I had to wait for some transferees to come in to want to join the veterinary corps and for them to catch up so that they could run a dog trainer's course of more than one person. So I hung around in the school, got to work with some bloodhounds and some of the other breeds, move around the different training sections, and then started my dog trainer's course. That's 3 months. You get 3 dogs, a green dog, half-trained dog, and a dog with a problem that's already been through some training, and then you have to resolve that. And at the end of those 3 months, obviously it's theory and practical. You go on exercises with special forces and stuff, and then you're expected to certify those 3 dogs, and that qualifies you as a basic dog trainer. And that's how your career starts. So that would have been in 83 that I actually certified my first 3 dogs and then become a dog trainer.
So from that point of graduating all those schools, those different disciplines, those 3 dogs that you certified, did you move on to doing a traditional U.S. military, move on to the field as a trainer, or did you stay as an instructor, a trainer?
Yeah, so again, a slightly different setup in the British military. The Royal Army Veterinary Corps, although it's the veterinary corps, is all animal aspects. So they have the blacksmiths, equitation, or farriers, I should say. Sorry, blacksmiths, but farriers, equitation, the veterinary techs and vets, and dog trainers. So all the animals come under the veterinary corps. The veterinary corps itself, at the time, was really small, like 50 people from the brigadier all the way down. And all they did was training. That was our trade, just to train dogs and train people. Okay. Anyone in the army could volunteer to be a dog handler. And they come for typically a 2-year attachment. Okay. They learn to become a dog handler, whether it's specialized, arms explosive search or tracking, or patrol work. And then they go and do those duties on their local camps, or they get deployed to Northern Ireland at the time, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc., the Balkans with us. And then they swap out every so often. Okay. Now, while we were dog trainers, yes, we would do high-profile, high-risk type dog handling. I was attached to the Royalty Protection Squad for quite a while. We instructed special forces and went to support their exercises. So there was in-field work, which was actual in-field work, but our primary role was to train dogs and to train personnel how to handle dogs.
So kind of like the 341st here, the 341st Training Squadron here in San Antonio, but you also had operational impact for special events or dignitaries.
Yeah, and it was also it's a career path, which I think it is now, but we stay with the veterinary corps. You can go all the way up to become an officer if you wanted to, but there's a full career path for dog trainers. So you always stay within the dog trainer role.
Okay, very different than U.S. military. Help yourself out at some point.
Right, and that was a big change I saw when I came here, a big difference in that, you joined to be a dog trainer. That was your trade and that was your role and that's what you stayed in. Whereas coming to the school at 341st, a lot of guys came in, but they're only there a couple of years and then leave again after just getting experience how to train some of these dogs, and then they're gone again, and
then maybe they're K9 out there, maybe they're not, based off.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Well, that's I remember discussing like some of that with you and talking through some of that. So you spent your entire military career in the Army Veterinary Corps.
Yeah, and just canines. So that's all I ever did.
When did you retire?
2004. It would have been something like September 2004, and I moved straight to the US.
To Fort Leonard Wood.
To Fort Leonard Wood, yeah.
So this was going on. Like I didn't even have any idea this was going on. So we started Specialized Search Dogs in the United States at Lackland in 2005. I had no idea that there was a pilot course that had already been happening, which was yourself. Who were some others that were?
Larry Lack, who was the MP. There was a couple of Australians that come over to assist, and then the Canadian Ron.
And that was primarily for Army engineers, right?
There was an MPs on it as well. It was sponsored by the engineers, but MPs had to have slots on it. And there was a Navy handler as well.
Okay. Yep. So then I remember 2005, you come into Lackland with a different approach than what we were doing together. I was speaking with Orlando last night, and when they started the SSD program for us, they were like, train these dogs and students off leash. And we were like, how do we do that? And they're like, we don't know, figure it out. So, when you showed up, we were really just spinning our wheels, putting dogs on zip lines, trying to figure out how to get them down the road and search. So I remember that being, honestly, a breath of fresh air. Because I remember when you came in, and you had from working AES dogs, right? AES?
Yeah, Arms Explosive Search Dogs.
So you had already had a lot of experience with working these off-leash dogs, and then you proved the concept in Fort Leonard Wood with Army engineers and MPs and Navy master arms. So describe that transition, I guess, right? Like you go from Fort Leonard Wood, where they basically contacted you and they want your SME experience to start this program, to coming over to the big old 341st.
Yeah, so it started a couple of years before. I was actually training engineers in landmine detection. But at the same time, some of the engineers had come over for AES, Arms Explosive Search, which is the SSD program. So we'd had some interaction. I'd visited Fort Leonard Wood to set up their Mine Dog program. And then when I came up to retirement, because it was my official retirement of 22 years, then they approached me and said, well, would you come over and do this instead of us sending all these students to the UK? So that's how I ended up at Fort Leonard Wood on the initial project. And initially, I arrived, it was a trailer on a parking lot, car park, at the back of the MP school, nothing else there, just this double wide. Larry Lack was the guy in charge, and students turned up, and we were begging, borrowing, stealing training areas and training, it was very much fly by the seat of your pants type event, but it got done. And Larry was great. He was logistically wise. He secured everything I kept demanding from him. So we did do those pilot programs. And then initially I moved back to the UK because it was only supposed to be a 1-year assignment, and it was Christmas, and someone called me, and I can't even remember who, and said, look, would you come to Lackland and just do 6 weeks transfer of the program and a bit of advising, a bit of help? And I think Larry Lack had been moved down there. So I said, okay. I came back. We was in that mini in the training area. I expected to only be there a few weeks. And then, pretty quickly they said, look, would you make it 3 months, 6 months? And then it ended up 6 years, as you know, of the whole program. I had been to the 341st before. I'd been there in 1999 as part of a landmine detection program. There was a conference in San Antonio, and they give us a half-day visit. So I'd been there before, but I'm walking into this mini building, which I remember was the first thing I did. I think maybe Orlando picked me up, drove at the gate, drove me to the Mini and said, okay, there's your team. And I walked in, and there's a bunch of students and then a group of instructors. I had no idea who was who, and I'm just thinking, am I going into the devil's den? Yeah. And, then over the next few days, I think we ended up at Papacito's on the Friday for dinner, all the instructors, and I've still got that photo. Yourself, Nick Fontaine, Orlando, I think Chris Willingham, obviously Rottenbury, and some others. And then got into the poker games on weekends, and built a rapport, but also realized that we was all in the same game for the same goal. I was blessed because people like yourself and Chris and Rottenbury and Nick and them, very open. And there wasn't that challenge to actually try and convince people that this is a good way to do things. It was, show us how to do it. That's great. Let's do it. So that helped hugely in that transition period. And I think, looking back over that time, despite a lot of challenges, I think as a team, we came together and produced some amazing dogs based on what we were given to produce it from. And a lot of the politics was going on, and things that we had to try and just either ignore or battle through to produce the product that was going downrange in the end. And we produced a lot of dogs.
You did.
Hundreds of teams.
And, to that point, the reason that I feel we went off leash was that IED threat was coming quickly and more frequent. And we just, you don't want people trying to find roadside bombs with a 6 foot.
No.
So this was definitely something, and you're right. I think that when you look back at the volume and the intensity, the work hours, the things that those instructors, the blood, sweat, and tears that they poured into that program, it was phenomenal. And definitely lives were saved, no doubt, 100%. What I liked about that program was that we were constantly evolving. Like you said, it seemed like every instructor that was there, at least with that initial crew, were very open to learning something new. You had it. I remember one instructor was like, I don't want to work with the Brits. I'm like, they've been doing it 20 years. Paul, come work with me, please, man. So definitely appreciate that. But yeah, so SSD, right? That's kind of your mark of what you made in the U.S. And a lot of people know you for that. But fast forward from all that time of Lackland Air Force Base, transitioning to Arizona students out at YPG, and then once that contract is up and you're moving on, what was next for Paul?
I went up to North Carolina, sponsored by the Army, to do combat tracking, canine combat tracking for a year with the MPs. And on completion of that was with K2, as you know. They approached me and said, would I take over as a project manager on the IDD dog handlers course, which I did. Did that for about a year. And then Office of Naval Research had an R&D program, the IDD 2.0, and I was promoted and took over that. So that was a couple of years or more doing advanced research. And that was really, I'd done research in the past, and I'd done it with the British forces and moving forward. But that was a really interesting time for me because we integrated with academics on the science of what we were trying to do in the field. And I started to see how coming together and actually working together could produce a better dog. So I had an opportunity to work on nutrition, conditioning, buried hides, the fitness of the dogs, all these different aspects of detection, which previously I hadn't really worked on, but I could see not only how you can condition dog, make it fitter, make it duration a lot better, how rehydration techniques, etc., can improve the whole approach to detection. And I think that was part of my approach when I started the company, Sharon Canine, was that it's not just about training the dog to do a task. The whole approach to increase duration, ability of detection, thresholds, generalization, these are all aspects that we have to put into our dogs to make them this one big picture of detection.
So that was kind of like your pivot. And I was around in and out from Afghanistan and back and forth, but I can recall that transition of you pivoting more towards research and development, more towards the academics, and I don't think you've stopped since then. So,
No, in fact, it's got even, more in that I am embedded in a lot of research. And I think, in the community, and unfortunately the dog community is very split, and it's very split in a lot of ways. Are you this? Are you that? And people get stuck in these little corners. And one of them is science versus applied. And I say, dog training is the art of science. It's always going to be an art. There's no question. You've got to be able to train the dog in front of you, and that dog is an animal. You cannot ever write, even though I've written a workbook, you can't write down exactly how you train each individual dog. You've got to adapt.
So would you say like that, to go back to that, people in their corners, I find that that's more from comfort level and education. Right? Meaning, if someone gets stuck in one way of imprinting their dog, that's it. They're not going to change. Right? And if you look at the whole picture, and we talked about this last interview I did, dog training fundamentals really haven't changed that much in 30 years, right? As far as what you're asking the dog to do, what response you're looking at, it's all the same. There's variations on how to get there, and but I wanted to just kind of highlight that. So please continue.
Yeah. So when I started my company, I realized that we're not giving the dogs all the tools they need. There's a great book called Atomic Habits, and I always talk about it on my workshops by James Clear. And it's about personal development as a human. It is actually a really good read. But I apply those principles to dog training. One of them is the 1% rule. And the idea is if you can improve yourself or something 1% each day, these tiny little incremental improvements over the course of the year, you're actually going to have a 34% or something like that total improvement in quality or standards or whatever it is. And when I apply that to dog training, I try and make 1% improvements continually in the dogs. And it could be simple things like giving them enrichment in the kennel, giving them a bed, having good nutrition, but also techniques I've learned through research in generalization and discrimination and thresholds. And all these tools actually arm your dog ready. Even going to Lowe's, do-it-yourself store, and having run around in those environments arms your dog for real world life. And I think, I have been successful with some of these deployments I've done, Asia and the Virgin Islands. Just got a report the other day, the dog broke the record in detecting hatchling iguanas in the bush, and I put this down to these 1% increments that I invest in the dog, and not just train the dog to find something and sit. It's everything else that goes into that. So when it goes into the field, it's prepared for everything, duration of search, the heat, the humidity, the intensity, how the odor changes in the environment, but how the odor changes when presented mixed within that environment. So yeah, I think it is an art, dog training, but science can help with our understanding and application of our training plans.
And application to the operational part. I think looking at it, it's very simple to take a dog in a training environment, such as Lackland, train that dog, get them very comfortable in that area, and they shine. And I think, unfortunately, on a lot of levels, people are just trying to maintain a certification level and not push past that to that operational level, where your dog is prepared for whatever you put. So I like that approach. I like that 1%. If you're adding something to that dog's toolbox every day, when they do encounter that new environment or that new distractor, it may be a little easier for them to work through. All right, so we did combat tracking for a year, went over to K2, and I followed your career there. I was there as well. Once K2 was done with, is that when you started your current company?
Yeah, so I was promoted again after so I was program manager at Office Naval Research R&D, and then I took a year's hiatus. I went and hiked the Appalachian Trail with my son. And Lane asked me back, Lane, the owner of K2, said, would you come back at the end of that? So I did. And I'd wanted to be the chief trainer and actually instigate some of my ideas into the training protocols. But I got promoted to director. And I was in the big house in the office dealing with director things, which is resources, and I really did not enjoy my time. Miss the dogs, miss dog training, which is what I want to do. And fortunately, I'd met a gentleman actually at a conference in San Antonio who was world expert in oil spills, Dr. Ed Owens, and we developed an off-leash oil spill detection canine. And we did a short research trial, but then ended up going up to Canada. I took a team of 4 dogs. I got to handle a dog. That was one of the agreement that I had with Lane, that I would actually go up there and actually work a dog as part of the project. Went for 4 months. We had over 8,000 confirmed fines, of which I had 3,500 myself.
These are all miniature, minor,
anything from
leaks of the pipeline?
tiny little pieces of oil. No. So what had happened is there'd been a pipeline burst on a hill above a river. Hundreds and hundreds of gallons, whatever it was, thousands of gallons had leaked into the river. By the time they realized, that spill now was 600 kilometers downriver. And it was 2 or 3 cities that took that water for drinking water. It went through some First Nation indigenous lands. So it caused a lot of problems. It's a recreational river. So it caused a lot of problems. So we went up there initially it was 1 dog, then 2 dogs on year 1. But then over winter, no surveying can be done because the weather's so bad. Ice fills that river several meters, but snow, etc. So we had to stop. And then the next spring, we went up with 4 dogs, of which I handled 1. And we spent 4 months up there just surveying. We started way downriver, moved up the river to find the extent, which was 600 kilometers. And then we just continued every single day, 6 days a week. We had 1 day off a week, with the environmentalists recording all the oil we could find. And that was anything from tiny bits of stain to huge mats, which have been covered by sand by the overwintering process. So all this oil was covered there. So we would mark where all the oil is, and then operations would come in, clean it up. But, I was there for 4 months, 6 days a week. We deployed on boats every day. It went from freezing cold and, in the snow, etc., to hot summers with mosquitoes, and there was bears and moose. I got attacked by a beaver, and I had 3,500 fines myself, verified.
Let's talk about that. That is something that most handlers in our profession, they'll never get that, right?
Right.
As a bomb dog handler, you hope you never get a fine. As a drunk dog handler, you're going to get fines. As a cell phone detector dog handler, you're going to get fines. 4,000 fines. So how does that impact that dog if they're actually getting that fine all the time? And the handler.
Yeah, so, like I said, with the 1% rule, we always teach our dogs variable reward. Comes from psychology, it is based off the slot machines, or not based off the slot machines, but that's an example of that partial reward system, we called it, but that variable reward where you get little bits in the hope you're going to get your jackpot. So I instigated that into the training program, and it means that during the course of a search, and I think the most we found in 1 day myself was 183 targets, was that I could give that dog a piece of cheese or chicken or whatever it is, and it would disappear quick, or praise, and every so often give it its toy as a jackpot. And that maintains motivation and duration of search, etc. So that all falls back to that integrating science into the art of dog training. How do I apply that, and how do I give my dogs the tools to cope with these types of long days?
Not just a variable of when you get a reward, but also a variable on the type.
Yeah. And that's hugely powerful. All the dogs go through a reward selection exercise that we train because we want that hierarchy, because we introduce variable reward type very early in the dog's training, very early. So the dog understands, okay, I'm going to get something. I don't know what, and I don't know when, but I'm getting something.
So it's like your boss coming up to you for doing a good job and saying, hey, good job, man. Appreciate you. And then a week later, you get a $3,000 bonus, right? The $3,000 bonus is the jackpot, and the pat on the back is the, hey, your motivation, right?
Yes.
Keep working.
But it's more important when you don't know what's about to come, because you're going to work at a higher level, hoping you're going to achieve the jackpot. Yeah. And that comes from the landmine detection program. Everything, all the protocols I use in dog training, I use for a reason. It's from a lesson learned or something. I can justify every technique I use, and I can explain to you why I use it. And the reward selection process that we do, clicker training all my dogs, everything we do is done based on that experience and how it applies in the field. And here's an example, how the application of that simple technique in dog training actually makes us more effective in the field. Now, if we'd gone into the field with dogs that were typically trained, that always have one find or two finds and then get the jackpot every single time, and we took those dogs into the field and we was having 183 finds in a day, you couldn't reward your dog with a Kong 183 times in a day. It'll be burnt out physically, and it'll be tired of the Kong, etc. You wouldn't have duration. Your dogs would get fed up. And if you tried suddenly to alter that technique in the field, now you get frustration. You get stress. And now you start to burn energy because I'm stressed, I'm frustrated. You give me a piece of cheese. I'm not used to that. I'm used to getting my Kong, but I don't know there's another hide out there. So what's going, So introducing those types of things throughout the training protocols means that when we go in the field, it's acceptable. And whether the dog finds 0 or 183, it doesn't matter. The dog's still been conditioned to that training process, because the other big difference I do in it, this came from Lackland, when we had to alter the training, was that we don't train systems of search with odor. So you don't put odor out to try and train a dog to do something. We train the dog how to do directionals and out and backs and everything. Then we add odor. So that means at any point during a search, the dog is doing obedience exercise in its mind. Finding odor is a bonus. It's a shortcut to find my jackpot. But at any point, I can actually reward the dog for doing a good get over. That means that dog can receive reward at any point during its search. Yeah, so why do I stress that I'm not finding my target? I'm getting rewards. I'm doing what I know how to do it, and I'm getting rewarded for it. So again, it goes back to that. Everything I do is a reason, and I know why I do these things. So yeah, a lot of finds. And subsequent from that, until very recently, we just finished the project. I was going down to the beach here on the Gulf of Mexico for every month doing surveys, and we're finding thousands of tar balls. Now, the dog might have 150 responses in 4 hours. She's just finding, and then we do a meter square measurement around that response and count all the tar balls she's found. But 150, 160 responses in 4 hours isn't unusual. So that's a lot, that's one to another to another. That variable reward schedule actually means that we were successful. Because you couldn't do it any other way.
If you try to do it, a Kong, you spend half the day just trying to get the Kong back. And tar balls, is that from a leak and it's formed a ball and it's washed up?
Leaks and seeps offshore. There's a lot of natural seeps offshore, and it washes up, and that can be anything from small to huge lumps, and it's buried.
There's some kind of leak or something that's pushing.
It could be, or just the natural seeps.
Right? If you're talking about the Gulf of Mexico, from Louisiana, Alabama.
Yeah, we found some actually fresher oil, which they believe had washed up from a spill down in Mexico, and it had ended up on the Texas shore. Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, I remember following you, talking with you doing those, and it sounded like a lot of fun, except for the beaver attack, of course. But, I think I know a couple of handlers that went out with you, and I know they really enjoyed their time out there.